I want to spend just a minute before I introduce our guests talking about the speaker series that we had a couple of weeks ago on June 18. Our speaker at 7 o'clock that night was Kito Huggins, who is an attorney. He's an African American. He's a gay man. He is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for a very large law firm in New York City. It's one of the largest firms in the world. So he's a distinguished person, excellent speaker. And those of us who attended, I think we got an awful lot out of that conversation. And because I think we had like 13 or 15 attending that talk, I took copious notes, and I just want to share some of the thoughts, because I thought that what he said to us, and he preferred that we not record it. I always defer to the speaker as to whether or not it should be recorded, because he has a prominent position in a prominent law firm. I think he felt that, not that he said anything that he wouldn't want people to hear, but on the theory of you just never know, he requested it not be recorded, but he had no problem with me giving some highlights. So he talked about the 4 seasons of social justice advocacy, and this will sound familiar to anybody who's followed what's going on since this all started with George Floyd. The reckoning, the renaissance, the resistance, and then the retrenchment and retraction. And certainly we've seen those seasons since, with racial issues in the country since the murder of George Floyd. And I think we're now, I was going to use this as transition to our speakers, but I think you see this as well with LGBTQ rights. And I'll come back to that. He talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and gave his own definitions, which is, I think, really, really important, because for many people you say DEI and we say, yes, what does it mean? Or you say DEI and people say, no, I don't know what it means. So I think everybody has their own personal definitions and what it means to them, how it speaks to them. What he talked about was, he used the concept of being in the room. And those who are Hamilton fans will be very familiar with it. But even if you don't know Hamilton, you get a concept of what's it like to be in the room and what's it like not to be in the room. And or what he talked about is, what are you when you are in the room? Yeah, you're in the room, but are you really in the room? So he talked about diversity as respecting perspectives and backgrounds and really having everyone being in the room. With equity, he talked about systems and practices and histories and patterns, things that we do every day that we don't necessarily think about, that we're not necessarily aware of, but that slowly we're becoming more aware of. And with respect to inclusion, he talked about who feels the agency to speak in the room. If you're really included, you're not just in the room, but you have the agency to speak and to be heard. I asked him to talk about, he said, one of the things we all want to know, this is mostly a white group. And I'm at 62, I'm one of the younger kids in the group. What can we do to be allies? And so he talked about performative versus transformative. And this is a really important concept, because one of the things we get accused of quite frequently on social media by those who oppose everything we do is, you're just being performative. You just stand out there, wave your flag, say, look at me, and that's all you do. And it's very difficult to say, well, no, we do a lot of other things. Do you want to hear about them? No, I don't want to hear about them just because I hate you. Fine. But how do we know that we're not just being performative and that we're being transformative? How do we know that we can act as allies? So he said, ask yourself some questions if you want to be allies. Can the other person, if you're in the room, even if the room is out here, if you're in a room with somebody, if you're in a conversation with somebody, can that other person speak in their authentic voice? Are you welcoming enough to someone who is black or gay, or of a different religion or of no religion? Are you enough of an ally that you allow that person to speak in their authentic voice? Is there trust? Do you truly care? Do you show that you truly care? Are your interests aligned? Do you have the authority and the access to address the problem? Can you do something about it? Will the other person suffer adverse consequences from speaking out? If I'm a real ally, I'm allowing this other person to speak without fear that something negative is going to happen to them. If they're in the room, will their opinion be an outlier? Will they be out of step with a consensus? Hey, Ron. Thanks for coming. I'm talking about a conversation we had on Zoom a couple of weeks ago with a gay black attorney who was speaking to us about being allies on DEI issues. So Kito talked about allyship. how can white allies support black leaders, black communities? He says, do you use your power to challenge mindsets, to challenge behaviors, to challenge patterns? Are you willing to address inequitable outcomes? Are you willing to actively listen? Which I think is really important, because for a group like ours, it's easy to say, I'm an advocate, I'm on your side. Don't need to know anything more about you. You're black, I'm with you. You're gay, I'm with you. It's important, Kito said, to listen and actively listen. And if you're really going to be an ally, you really want to try to understand that person's perspective and that person's story. He said, listen with your heart. Educate yourself. Take a risk of being uncomfortable. Risk the discomfort. And this I thought was really amazing. Act as stakeholders, not bystanders. And I'm hoping that what we do, not just here in our conversations and in our social media conversations and with the Zoom speaker series we have, and in the individual conversations we have with people when they say, oh, you're part of that Justice Southbury thing, what's it all about? I'm hoping that even though people drive by and we are standing, that we are not bystanders. As Ed would say, because they've got the Upstanders Club, that we are upstanders, that we are stakeholders, that we stand up for people, and we take a stake in their future, and that we care about what they do and we care about what happens for them. And then the last thing he said that was, I wrote this down and I'm going to put it somewhere because I thought it was one of the most awesome phrases I've ever heard. Because my daughters, if you ask any of my 3 daughters, hey, what happens if I ask your dad a direct question? They will all smile, they will say, he will never give you a direct answer, ever. He's a lawyer. Whatever question you ask him, he'll always say, well, it depends on this and on that. And they'll know, Dad will say, there's no black and white, there's always gray areas. Everything is in the gray areas. One of the things Kito talked about, when he talked about the gray areas, he said, paint the gray in your own vibrant color. How amazing is that? And so if you combine painting the gray areas of life in your own vibrant color, combine that with all of the advice he was giving about how to be allies, I thought, and Jeremy, I assume you, John, others who attended that, he was just full of, he was full of really helpful things to say, and I hope that some of that got transmitted in these comments. So, again, go back to what he was talking about, that there was the racial reckoning after the murder of George Floyd, a renaissance of conversations and communications and attention by the country, attention by corporations, attention by groups like ours to, we got to do something about this. This needs to be a rebirth, followed by enough resistance and then retrenchment and retraction. And you are seeing that now in the gay rights movement.